So now that we've run our oVEMP responses, we're going to label them. So there's a few ways that we can label them. The first way is to go over to the far left side, and we're going to look at the Edit tab. And so whatever handle I've double clicked, so these are identifying which waveforms. So as I click through these here on the left, those are the ones that I'm going to label. Say I want to label this bottom one here. I've got this double clicked, so I can label my P1 by clicking that, and then go over here and place the P1 where it is, and then the N1. Something to note about this system is that for oVEMPs, it's backwards. And so it shows P1, N1, but when we have an oVEMP response, the first thing that we're going to label actually is the N1 response, and then the P1 response. So just keep that in mind as you're labeling, and even as you write reports or do your interpretation, these numbers are going to look a little bit backwards just because the system just puts P1 first. When you do your cVEMP responses, these are still in the same order, but your cVEMP starts with the P1. And so just keep that in mind. So I can label them this way, just like that. The second way I can do it is by right-clicking, and then I can place whatever waveform I want. So I could place P1, and then it gives me P1 to place wherever I'd like. So if I want to move it, I can move it there. The third way is to use your keyboard, so the number keys on your keyboard. So because P1's in the first position here, if I click the number 1 on my keyboard, it highlights P1 for me. This tends to be my preferred method. Just keep in mind these are backwards. So when I click 2, I go backwards to my N1, and I would place my N1 where I would like it. And so you'll see those are the 3 different ways that we can label these. Another thing that we often do with our oVEMP responses is combine some of them if these aren't really pretty. The left ones are quite pretty, they're quite large, but these right ones are much smaller and more typical of what we see in a lot of our patients. And so the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and delete the markers. And so I click on the waveform, right click, go to delete, and it delete all waveform markers, and then it double checks with me to make sure that that's what I want to do. Yes. These down here I don't love, these are not very pretty, and so if I want to delete these, I'm going to double click on the handle that I want to delete. If I click the waveform, it gives me waveform options like placing things. But if I right click on the handle, it will let me delete the entire curve, the waveform. Note that if you delete this, it is gone forever. So when I delete it, that's not coming back. If there's one that I kind of like, but I don't really want to show for my report, I can double click it and hide it instead. So you'll still see the handle here. I usually will move them to the very far bottom or very far top just so they're out of my way. They're still here. They're not deleted forever, but you don't have to see them. And so that's another thing that you can do if you have additional waveforms, which is pretty common for oVEMPs. And so if I'm looking at my oVEMP responses, I'm going to kind of stack these up. And these 2 here look like they're going to be our better 2. And so let's create an average for these. So in order to do this, I'm going to double click on one of the waveforms, and then I'm going to right click on the other one that I want to average together. We have 2 choices. I can create a sum curve which merges them into one, just like that. And if I want to undo that, I can right click on the handle and undo the sum curve, and so it separates them back out. The other thing that I tend to prefer is to double click on one, right click on the other, and then we're going to add this curve, and it creates a third curve. Now, how do I know which one that is? If you look in the handle, there's a little A. That is my added curve. So I've got added curve listed right there. So I'm going to scoot some of these down. Because I averaged these 2 and didn't use this bottom one, I'm going to right click and just hide it so that I know that these were the 2 waveforms that I used to add and create this added curve, which I will now label with my keyboard. 1 is my P1, 2 is my N1. These left ones are really good, so I don't necessarily have to add or merge them together, but just so you can see it again, I'm going to double click one, right click the other, and we're going to add this curve as well, so you'll see an A on that also. So I'll scoot that to the top. And so a lot of times I'll just kind of scoot these 2 together here at the bottom just to make it more easy to see when you print, and then the added curve is here at the top. And we'll do the same thing. I've double clicked on this one, so I'm going to put a 1 up here for my P1. You can scoot it around till you're happy with where you've placed it, and then 2 for my N1. And so now I have everything labeled, and so in the next video we'll talk about interpreting these findings once things are labeled.